Algae and Slime Molds, Chapter 6. Algae and slime molds are not related. We merely group them together because while they have roles in soil food webs, they generally don't affect gardeners. That said, we hope we have already made the point that the soil food web is a community of organisms playing out a drama. When one or another character is removed, it may have significant consequences on how the play unfolds. Algae. Algae are broadly defined as single-celled or thread-like photosynthetic organisms, including seaweeds and even giant kelp. Who hasn't seen algae in a pond, river, or lake, at the beach, or if not there, on the glass of a fish tank? There are three kinds of algae: marine, freshwater, and terrestrial. The latter often living in soil, on or near the surface, where sunlight is available, not near the roots. While most algae require very moist conditions, it is surprising to find some that grow in hot deserts and at the frozen poles, though even these still require a film of water to survive. Although algae are closely related to bacteria on the tree of life, they are often thought of as primitive plants because they are photoautotrophic, meaning they take energy from the sun and produce their own food. Indeed, algae, like plants, are primary producers, not dependent on the soil's organic matter or other members of the soil food web for their food needs, as are bacteria and fungi. Moreover, algae lack the specialization that characterizes higher plants, and unlike plants, they have no true roots, leaves, or stems, and don't have a vascular, water and food conducting system. The cell walls of all but the diatoms, a form of algae, do contain cellulose, and in this way they are like plants. The cell walls of diatoms are composed of silica, covered with an organic skin that decays and disappears after the organism dies, leaving behind in huge numbers the silica skeletons that make up diatomaceous earth, a product familiar to many gardeners. Most gardeners associate algae with bodies of water, not the raised bed or lawn, yet there you will find them if there is enough moisture. Terrestrial algae require not only light, but a film of water in order to survive. A teaspoon of soil may contain anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 cells of green algae, phylum Chlorophyta, yellow-green algae, Xanthophyta, and diatoms, Bacillariophyta. At one time, algae served as pioneer organisms, growing on moist rock surfaces, and when they died, combining with weathered rock and air and water to form early soils. In this important way, algae helped start the succession of life by providing necessary organic matter when there was no other. Algae help to create soil by forming carbonic acids as part of their metabolic functions. This causes rock to weather, a great example of chemical weathering brought about by biological activity. Resultant bits of minerals and the dead algae combine, producing soil eventually. This is not unlike the decay of rock surfaces caused by lichens, the symbiotic relationship between certain algae and fungi. The fungus provides a humid and somewhat protected environment in which the alga can live and in return receives photosynthesized food from the alga. In this relationship, the decay abilities of algae are aided by their fungal partners, and the process of weathering is sped up considerably. Lichens contribute nitrogen to the soil, and blue-green algae, Cyanophyta, use the enzyme nitrogenase to fix nitrogen, either in a symbiotic relationship or non-symbiotically, similar to nitrogen-fixing bacteria. This is how rice plants can get nitrogen from the water in which they grow. In truth, the role of algae in gardening is minor because of their need for sunlight, which can only penetrate a short distance into the soil, However, where they do exist in the soil, algae can secrete polysaccharides, mucilage, and slimes, all sticky stuff, which help bind and aggregate soil particles. Their presence can also help to form air passageways in otherwise compacted soil. And algae fit into some soil food webs as primary producers that are eaten by certain nematodes. Slime molds. The slime molds are unusual-looking amoeba-like organisms that inhabit damp, rotting wood, leaves, manure, lawn thatch, rotting mushrooms, and other organic material. They spend most of their lives pursuing bacteria and yeast in the soil. The few hundred different kinds of slime molds are in many ways like fungi, but largely differentiated by the way they eat, whereas fungi digest their food externally and then bring the nutrients inside the organism. Slime molds engulf food and digest it internally. The two groups of slime molds, Dictyosteliomycota, cellular slime molds, and Myxomycota, plasmodial slime molds, have similar life cycles. They start out as spores and germinate into myxamoebae, amoeboid organisms that live in the soil and ingest bacteria, fungi spores, and small protozoa, locking up the nutrients they contain and preventing them from leaching out. They themselves are food for insect larvae, worms, and in particular, specialized beetles that have mandibles designed to scoop up the soft mold and cram it into their mouths. At some point, for no apparent reason, individual myxamoeba swarm together. Up to 125,000 or so form a mass that looks something like a big slug, a dollop of jelly, or in some cases, vomit. These masses are of various sizes, in shades of tan, yellow, pink, or red, and are actually quite attractive in their own way. The species of one common plasmodial slime mold, genus Fusarium, are usually about 1 inch thick and can grow to 1 foot or more wide. The individual cells in the mass lose their walls, and the resulting plasmodium emerges from the soil and slowly moves over leaves, grass, driveways, logs, mulch, or anything else in its way. It does so at an average speed of 1 millimeter per hour, engulfing food as it goes. If a source of organic dead matter is put near a plasmodium, it will go to it. Even more amazingly, if you cut a plasmodium in half or even in quarters, the parts will come together again. All sorts of theories have been put forward to explain why these organisms swarm. It may be that when food becomes scarce, there is a need to work together. There is, after all, something to be said for strength in numbers. What is known is that each individual myxamoeba leaves a bit of chemical attractant in its wake as it travels, presumably on a path towards nutrients. Other slime molds come in contact with this slime sheet, not unlike that left by a slug as it travels, and take the same trail, adding their exudates to the path. As more and more organisms gather on the path, each adding its chemical slime to the mix, the attraction increases until literal swarms of myxamoeba congregate into a growing mass. Eventually, the plasmodium finds an appropriate spot and forms a fruiting structure, or sporangium. This unusually looking body is of a distinctive shape for each slime mold species. Some sporangia are like tiny raised towers, in the top of which spores are formed. Sporangia come in yellow, blue, red, brown, and white, and form a beautiful net of colors that really is as pretty as anything you can grow in your gardens. From the soil food web perspective, slime molds help cycle nutrients, and the slime each individual myxamoeba creates helps bind soil particles. When conditions become unfavorable, plasmodia dry up and turn to powdery dust. Although these organisms don't play a major role in the garden, when a gardener comes across a slime mold, he or she remembers it.